What's good, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. This is the Texans Better Talk Show. Today, we're going to be talking about how do we fix this offensive line. And if you're new to the channel, I'd really appreciate it if you'd like and subscribe. Daily Texans content, the best place to get some Texans content, even if you're not a Texans fan and you just like hearing what's happening. So, we have to talk about this offensive line. This offensive line might have been the most disappointing unit on the Texans coming into the 2024 season. Going into the season, we were very confident in this offensive line. We saw Titus Howard finally able to play right tackle, Laramie Tunsil on the left tackle, Juice Scruggs, the new draft pick at center, Shaq Mason at right guard, the veteran, left guard Kenyon Green, the athletic freak. And so we felt really good about this to where when they drafted Blake Fisher, every single one of us was doubting that pick. Most of us, at least. I was doubting that pick. I was like, why are we spending a second round pick on a dude who's not going to touch the field in this 2024 season when we have a star studded offensive line that will finally be able to stay healthy? One of the biggest critiques of the 2023 O line was how many different people you had to plug in there. Michael Dieter at center, George Fant at right, just really tossing and throwing people in there. Well, we get to the season, we start playing some games, and very quickly you realize this line can't run block, this line can't pass block. When they start to run block, they lose the pass blocking, and when they start the run blocking, they lose the pass blocking. Such a terrible offensive line. I'm not going to give you any mind-blowing stats. I'll give you a couple. That's a lie. One of them is CJ Stroud got sacked, I think, 63 times on the season. It was either 63 or 67. Pretty much equally bad at that point. Also, if you watch the last quarter of that Chiefs game, the one that ultimately sent us home, I mean, Stroud got sacked 8 times that game, and it just looked awful on the offensive line. Again, was not a concern we had going into this season, very quickly became one, and ultimately capped our ceiling. Our ceiling was extremely low because of this offensive line, and it was just awful to look at with an awful group and an awful unit. So how do we fix the O line? I've ranted about the O line going into the 2025 season. How do we fix this O line? Well, first I want to talk about things the Texans have already proactively done that can give us some optimism that they're going to take this seriously. The first one being Nick Caley's hiring and Bobby Slowick's firing, a 2-for-1 deal. D'Amico made the hard decision, and he decided, you know what? My defense played their butts off. My defense could have gone to the Super Bowl. Why are we not there? Because of our offense. And he said, you know what, Bobby? You're my friend. We obviously came up together in San Francisco. He ends up firing him. He had the tough conversation. That is what D'Amico Ryans had to do, and he finally did it. Who do they hire? They hire the best possible candidate they could have. Out of everyone they've interviewed, Nick Caley was by far, above the shoulders of the other candidates. Whether you agree with that or not, that's your decision. He's obviously never called plays in the offense before, but he was the top candidate, pretty much regarded in the Texans community as well as nationally, because he comes from that McVay tree and he's turned down offensive coordinator jobs in the past. And, the McVay offense is probably the best offense in the NFL right now, especially with his disciples like LaFleur and Kevin O'Connell in Minnesota, just won Coach of the Year. Like, the McVay way is the way you want to go. But why am I bringing up a new offensive coordinator? Well, one of the big questions I had when looking at this offensive line was how much of this is talent and how much of this is scheme, and maybe how much of this is effort. So 3 things: scheme, talent, effort. The talent might just not be there. And you know what? If you're Bobby Slowick and you're trying to call plays with one hand tied behind your back because the offensive line can't block, then that's not on Slowick. But I would like to think there's some amount of talent, and I'd like to think that that scheme could make that talent gap be a little better. It just felt like watching Bobby Slowick, I really felt like he was doing nothing to help with pass protection. Defenses figured out his pass protection deficiencies, and the reason he got fired, the tangible reason why Bobby Slowick got fired, I'll tell you right now, is because he could not adapt his pass protection for Stroud, and because Stroud got sacked 67 times. And if it truly is a 100% talent thing, the O-line got Bobby Slowick fired, and that's why he's no longer with us. That's the main reason. If it's not a talent thing, then he deservedly got it fired. I mean, I think there's other reasons he should have been fired outside of the pass protection and offensive line, but look, I'm just saying. So, again, and the effort, that's completely tied to the player, so not talking about that much. But That's why I bring up the offensive coordinator. That's why I bring up Nick Caley, is because Nick Caley needs to assess our offensive line and he needs to call schemes and plays that will, if there's a weakness in our offensive line, that will cover it up. Because Bobby Slowick was completely and utterly unable to do that. He called bland, repetitive plays, run, run, third and long pass, run, run, third and long pass over and over again. Nick Caley needs to analyze our offensive line deficiencies and he needs to fix them. And I truly think he can, and I have really high hopes for what he can do. So that's the first thing they've already proactively done. Fire Bobby, hire a new offensive coordinator. What is the second thing the Texans have done? Well, they've fired the O-line coach. That's a pretty big thing. If the O-line performs as poorly as it did, you can make sure the dude overseeing it's going to get canned. Now, this is confusing because, yes, Cole Popovich was the Texans' assistant O-line coach under Chris Strausser. When Chris Strausser gets tossed, they just promote Cole Popovich. I completely understand the sentiment of saying, well, that's not enough. We want a new guy. Why are we internally hiring a dude who saw the offensive line at its worst and allowed it to happen? Well, here's a couple positives. The first positive I'll say is maybe Cole Popovich had little say in the matter. This is probably the weakest one, but maybe it was really just Chris Strausser calling the shots. The second positive I'll say is this. When Chris Strausser last year was the head offensive line coach, Cole Popovich was mainly the run blocking guy. And I'm not going to sit here and act like our run blocking was always amazing, but Joe Mixon had a pretty good year for being out. There were games where Joe Mixon went for 150, 130 yards, couple touchdowns. So if you would have told me, hey, we're going to hire the internal guy who's in charge of pass blocking, I would look at you crazy. I do think Cole Popovich kind of being that run game main guy in the run blocking game, getting him promoted with his success, I do think that's some of the reason why he was able to get the job. And the third positive I'll say is this. Look, Nick Caley interviewed Cole Popovich the moment he got the job. Like, Nick Caley looked at Cole Popovich, our new head offensive coordinator, and he said, all right, tell me what went wrong. Let's hear it. He listened to it. And not only did he make him the head offensive line coach, he also made him the official run game coordinator. So again, like I was saying, Cole Popovich originally just the offensive line assistant coach in charge of run blocking. After getting interviewed and grilled by D'Amico and Nick Caley and Nick Caserio, now he's the run game coordinator and head offensive line coach. And that's what you want to see. If you're going to promote a guy, you want to trust him. You want the organization to trust him. They obviously trust Cole Popovich. I get the reservations, but that's what they've done. So now that we've talked about what they have done, let's talk about what they need to do. And this first one is going to be so freaking simple, and they absolutely have to do it. I really think they'll do it. Draft an O-lineman. I don't care if it's the first pick of the draft as an O-lineman. I don't care. I know a lot of people are bent on receivers. I think there's a real possibility when there's no good receivers that fall at 25. And if there's no good receivers at 25, go draft a lineman. I've been very vocal about this. Tyler Booker, I don't know if he gets there, but if Tyler Booker's your guy, draft him. Armand Membo, my personal favorite, my guy. If Armand Membo's there, go draft him. Maybe you wait till the second. You get Gray Zabel. I'm not saying it has to be a first-round pick. You can go wide receiver, then you can go offensive tackle or offensive guard, whatever. Look at Gray Zabel. Look at Wyatt Milam in the third. Don't look at Wyatt Milam in the second. Please don't do that. Maybe Connerly, maybe Savayena. Maybe, start cycling through your offensive line, whatever your draft board looks like, whoever is banded, and you guys too doing mocks, go pick an offensive lineman because you need a body to throw in this room. So that's the first thing they need to do. What's the second thing they need to do? Get rid of Shaq Mason. I don't care if you trade him. That would be better. I don't care if you cut him. That would be worse. It would be better than keeping him. I do not want to see Shaq Mason play another snap of football for the Texans. I know what you're thinking. Why Shaq Mason? He had easily the worst season of football in his life. I guarantee it. He played awful. And let me just give you one damning stat. Shaq Mason was tied for number one in the league with most sacks allowed by an offensive guard. So if you take all the offensive guards in the National Football League, he was tied with one other person for allowing the most sacks at the guard position. That number was 8 sacks. Titus Howard only started like 8 games. Or excuse me, Shaq Mason only started 8 games. Shaq Mason only started 8 games. He led the league in sacks allowed from the guard position, and he missed like 5 games, however many it was. It's absolutely absurd that what I just read is true. Look, Shaq Mason, he couldn't pass block. There were so many times Stroud got pressure immediately up the middle. He couldn't run block. He was slow pulling. His age is getting to him. He's washed. I mean, I'm sure he's a good veteran presence. He's won rings with Brady. Yada, yada, yada. I don't care. There's a certain point when your age defeats you. And Shaq Mason is washed. His age has defeated him. It sounds brutal. It's the reality. He cannot not be your starting right guard moving into the 2025 season. If Shaq Mason is your starting right guard, and if Nick Caley believes that and sees his performance, he's an idiot. And I will already have my reservations against Nick Caley. I don't care if you cut him. Let me read you some numbers. If you trade Shaq Mason or cut Shaq Mason past the deadline, I think it's June 1st. Look, if you trade him, you lose $8 million over 2 years in dead cap. You save $20 million. If you cut him, you lose $9 million. You save $19 million. So not as bad. But look, I don't care if you cut him. He's a vet. He can try to find a roster spot. Someone will pick him up. Have fun with it. We don't need him here. He's awful. And that's pretty much all I'll say about that. And it's not like you're missing out cutting Shaq Mason. You're missing out on his veteran presence. I don't think anyone on that O-line benefited from that, from their performance. Like, you could have easily put Juice Scruggs at right guard and cut Shaq Mason. You could have easily done that. Why they didn't do that, I don't know, but whatever. Okay, so now let's get into this final one, talking about the current offensive line situation. The next thing that they need to do, Nick Caley and the Houston Texans offense, what they need to do is they need to put Blake Fisher at right tackle, and you need to keep Titus Howard at left guard. I know Blake Fisher is going into his second year. I know you weren't planning on him playing this year, but every time Blake Fisher has stepped in, he's been adequate. He's been serviceable. Has he gotten beat? Has he been, made a fool of during the Chiefs game a couple times, during the Chargers game? Yes, but he was a rookie. Those are very valuable snaps that he got. He only started a handful of games this year, and I think he looks better than Titus. And I think Titus looks pretty good at guard. So make Titus Howard, as absurd as it is to say, make him the highest paid guard in the league, or one of them, because he got paid tackle money, and now you're having to put him at guard. Put Blake Fisher in as your starting right tackle. I hope that's what Nick Caley does. I hope that's what the offense does, because it needs to happen. Also, figure out the Juice Scruggs situation. Okay? Is Juice Scruggs going to be your left guard? Is he going to be your center? Is Jarrett Patterson, has he won the center role? The 6th-round pick from the same draft as Juice Scruggs, who was a 2nd-round pick? I don't know. If Juice Scruggs isn't going to beat out Jarrett Patterson at the center spot, he's just going to be sitting on the bench, and he's a wasted pick. He's a wasted 2nd-round pick, considering Jarrett Patterson was a 6th-round pick, and he's playing center. So if you want to tell me your starting offensive line is LT on the left, Blake Fisher at the right, Jarrett Patterson at center, and then Titus Howard and Juice Scruggs on your right guard position, that's fine with me. And if you're going to cut Shaq Mason, then he needs to be your right guard. Hopefully not, though, because you're drafting someone, remember? So figure out the Juice Scruggs situation. If he's a bench player and you've drafted a new guard to play over him and you've got rid of Shaq Mason, so be it. But I'm sick of having Juice Scruggs half in games, half out. You put him in, Shaq Mason gets in, you take him out. It's just terrible, 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 terrible. And the final thing I'll say, that goes without saying, this is already a longer video, sorry, I just have a lot to say about this line. Kenyon Green needs to be gone. I know you can't trade him. I know you're not going to cut him. You're going to give him some leniency because he's a 1st-round pick that you completely busted on. But he realistically needs to be cut. They're not going to do it. I know they're not. Kenyon Green has the physical body of a beautiful O-lineman. Okay. It's mental. He doesn't understand the position. His technique sucks. He sucks at the position. He can't pull right. He can't pass block right. He lunges with his head. He can't pick up blitzes. He knows fucking nothing about the position. Okay. Kenyon Green needs to be cut. Take him out of the equation. Whatever you have to do. He cannot be your starting left guard. Should already be obvious, but if they fall in love with him at training camp and he's just the unquestioned left guard starter, I will refuse to watch a Texans game until he gets benched. I mean, seriously, that dude is god awful. And I know he went to A&M, and I know he's god awful. He cannot see the field again. And on that happy note, sorry that got dark. I just can't stand Kenyon Green. That's how you fix the O-line. So just to recap, guys, draft an offensive lineman. Get rid of Shaq Mason. Make Blake Fisher your starting right tackle and Titus Howard your starting left guard. Figure out what you want to do with Drew Scruggs. He's probably a serviceable backup. He's probably slightly worse than Jarrett Patterson, who's played great at center. Maybe not great, but he's played well enough. But if you want to put him in at center, fine. Make Patterson the backup and get Kenyon Green out of there. Get Kenyon Green out of there. So, with that rant, sorry guys, I get animated about the O-line position, but that's all I got for this video. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see y'all on the next one, man. Peace out.